The camera's on you.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another SACPA session this morning. I hope you're all feeling well. SACPA acknowledges that this event takes place on the lands of Blackfoot people and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. And we pay respect to their past, present, and future cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. SACPA commits to assist reconciliation efforts by raising awareness of the ways past and present injustices can be reconciled. SACPA is also very thankful for the continuing support we receive from the University of Lethbridge, Shaw Spotlight, and the Lethbridge Herald. Today, we're very happy to welcome Chris Perry on the topic of sustainable farming. What role can biogas production play in reducing CO2 emissions? Chris Perry is the co-founder and president of CKP Farms Limited and Grow the Energy Circle Limited, which is also known as GrowTech. He's a farm boy at heart with a passion for renewable energy. He would like to participate in expanding Alberta's agricultural industry to its full potential in the next decade or two. Chris manages a 4,000 irrigated acre farm together with his brother Harold in southern Alberta. They grow potatoes and green peas. GrowTech commissioned a 633 kilowatt generating capacity anaerobic digester waste to energy facility in November 2014, and they produce triple their farm's electricity use from organic waste. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today, and we look forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Annalise, and thank you to SACPA and the opportunity to talk. Also a happy belated National Agriculture Day that was just this past Tuesday. I'm first and foremost a farmer, so shout out to all the other farmers in the crowds out there. This is my first legit venue, I suppose, at really getting an opportunity to talk about our story with a little bit of a political tinge. So I've changed it up a little bit from previous stories, if some of you might have heard, and hopefully it makes sense. I'm going to share a little bit of relevant political news, some recent, some not. And my intent is that by getting this story out and combining with our story, hopefully it will all come together and make some sense in the end, and look forward to the question and answer after if that comes up. So next slide, talking about big picture stuff and obviously climate, but starting with the Paris Agreement. So of course, the legally binding international treaty we have all heard about. 196 parties agreed to participate. The goal to limit global warming, and whether we agree or not, or any kind of peace, we all can agree that it is big news around the world and internationally. So recent but recognition from Prime Minister Trudeau and Mr. Biden down south, the US back in joining the Paris Agreement. So that made news. Next slide, on the international stage, of course, we have China participating, we have Russia participating, India, Denmark, a shout out to Knut Peterson there and the Danes in the crowd, Germany, of course, and the EU always at the forefront of climate action. So a real international stage. Here at home, the Government of Canada, next slide, we've obviously are participating to a standard, and some of the pieces that we are putting in place to help address our climate change is a new hydrogen strategy, the clean fuel standards that has come out federally, hopping into provincially. Here at home in Alberta, we have the Climate Change Emissions Management Corporation, now dubbed the ERA, their emissions reduction, and the Carbon Fund in Alberta. So we've been lucky enough to get some funds from that, but funding projects that are carbon friendly. In British Columbia, I'll bring this together at the end while I give them a shout out, but they're very aggressive on their climate goals and now have a pathway to 2050 on getting carbon neutral. So lots of stuff going on in the space. Next slide. back a little bit, a while ago, back at the Paris Agreement talks, a lot of interest and participation from the agriculture and the food chain sector. So the significant piece that agriculture and food has to play in regards to carbon reduction. So lots of really big players in the room there, and I'll bring that together a little bit later in the next slide. Number 6 here, Annalise, thank you. PepsiCo and McCain, some of our customers at home. So PepsiCo is the owner of Frito-Lay, who we have our plant in Tabor and in Lethbridge. And McCain's, of course, is across the road from us here in Chin. And, you know, both big sustainability platforms and heavy right now on carbon and marketing. And that is going right through the value chain and certainly down to the producer level on some recognition. So next slide. This is the interesting piece where internationally we are really starting to see not only that countries participate, but countries that are not participating are starting to feel a little bit of pressure from stuff like a carbon tax on actually imports and exports of goods into other places. And if we think about Canada and our role in the piece of international trade, our agriculture products specifically, and oil and gas resources, we export a lot of stuff. So a relevant piece of news there kind of going around the world before I'll hop into our own journey. And then, like I said, I'll bring that back and hopefully it makes some sense why I started with some of the political news. So the Perry family farm. So as in the introduction, we're 4th generation farm right now. I farm together with my brother and our families. Mom and dad are still happily in the picture, and we got lots of girls and one little boy in the 5th generation to come. We employ 12 full-time people and up to about 40 people throughout the year at harvest time. Next slide. We are primarily farmers for sure, with a spotlight on potatoes, and we love our spuds. Next slide. We own 32 irrigated quarters of land, and that's a lot of land. We have a potato contract for Frito-Lay and McCain's, as mentioned. We have a green pea contract with Bonduelle. We grow mixed grains, we grow green manure crops and some seed canola. So ultimately, we recognize that we use an incredible amount of resource to grow this food, and that we must be responsible stewards to ensure sustainable production. Our strategic intent on the farm is to ensure that the farm is in better health than received for future generations. So next slide, pulling from a fantastic book and read, if you haven't read it, Good to Great, one of the classics, but a BHAG and kind of where everything intersects there. It's a big, hairy, audacious goal. So we like the farmer version of this one on interdisciplinary thinkers to dream big, get shit done, know how to have fun. So in the middle of that, next slide, we came up with our 2020 vision. So our 2020 vision on the farm was to reduce our major resource inputs by 20% and increase our net yields by 20%, all by the year 2020, which was last year. But that started off in 2012. A little recap on how that is going. It went very well, and we'll finish that up at the end. But some of the things that we did on that journey to participate in that vision was, first of all, soil life and carbon. Now, my brother, I meant to put a slide for Harold on here, but Harold is a Nuffield scholar. He did travel the world in an agriculture setting, looking at soil health and building soil carbon, and we participate in many practices on the farm to do this. So we compost every year a lot. We messed around with sequestering tractor exhaust and sequestering it in the soil on our passes. We do cover cropping and green manuring cropping and any soil amendment that we can possibly do to get more carbon back into our soil, organic matter. Next slide. The bigger picture piece on the energy front was really the birth of what GrowTech became. And back in the day, we recognized that we use that large resource, as mentioned. We love renewable energy. We throw away a lot of potatoes. There's food waste everywhere, unfortunately, in the system. And we wanted to do something great. And so next slide, in 2004, we said, let's build a biogas plant. So that's an old early rendition of what we wanted to do out in Chin. and lo and behold, we got it done. But it was not an easy piece. So we'll get into that. But next slide, just really to be familiar, biogas, I encourage, if you enjoy the talk or aren't quite familiar, we have a great website in association with the Canadian Biogas Association. Lots of information on there, but essentially biogas gets confused with biodiesel or biofuel, which it is not exactly a biodiesel or fuel. It's a biogas, which is a methane source created from organic matter, the breakdown in an anaerobic setting. So we can do different things with biogas. You can burn it in a flame to use as heat for a boiler. We can upgrade the biogas into a renewable natural gas and actually inject it into the gas grid. We can burn it in an engine to create electricity, or we can also actually compress it and then turn it into a liquid fuel that could be used in the transportation industry, which it is in a few spaces. So ultimately, though, agriculturally produced biogas, which is largely manure-based biogas production and or other organic waste, is a very low negative carbon intensity energy source. So much better than our present day energy sort of production. So next slide. Grow Tech, here's our old circle and how Grow the Energy Circle came to be, but really a circular economy and taking our cull potatoes, lots of neighboring manure, processor waste, and some landfill diversion organics and feeding them into our anaerobic digesters, essentially an industrial stomach. We get byproducts out of that digestion, which is the biogas, but also digestate. So we are returning all the nutrients back to the land. We get reusable water, and then we also get some residual heat that is used in our whole process, and looking to co-locate goes back to the land, and then so on and so forth. So next slide, lots of benefits from waste to energy. We have the big one that we're talking about today really is the significant greenhouse gas reduction. So it's a true green power. Like I say, it's a base load. It's a little bit one up on for example, a wind or a sun, that it doesn't need the sun to shine and it doesn't need the wind to blow. We're a live cycle of biology that's running 24/7. So it's really a base load. Utility companies and grids quite enjoy biogas from its stable energy production, whether it is in renewable natural gas or electricity. So next slide. I'll get into this. This is a busy slide, but we'll go through quickly the whole journey that we had. So we really came up with the idea that 2002, 2004, we went into a feasibility study with the Alberta Research Council. It sounded like a great idea. The story, there was no turning back. It fit our farm and everything that we wanted to do. The feasibility and the economics were not making a lot of sense, but we just believed in the project so much, and it was the right piece. So there was quite a bit of government support coming back from the PCs back in the day with some of the bioproducer credit programs, a biomarketing and development program. And we had a projection and a feasibility done with about $70 to $100 per megawatt hour power going forward. Now that was great, and unfortunately in some early years that didn't really come to be. But first of all, we'll jump in. Lots of regulatory pieces to get through. So 2010 and 11 we went into heavy planning, and 2012 we went into approvals. So if you skip to the next slide, maybe please, we'll go into the regulatory permitting. And again, I'll go back to thinking about the early slides there, that we are farmers at heart. So I can appreciate the oil and gas boys and everybody that has to deal with the commercial side of regulatory permitting much more. And I can say that us as farmers, we have not had to go through processes like this. So it was overwhelming, to say the least, as farmers. And all this to go for a better than normal practice. So doing better with our organic waste, doing better with our manure resources, and yet taking a lot more time, effort, energy, and dollars to actually do that. So the big one was our Alberta Environment Permit. Now, because we're waste to energy system, we're basically kind of looking at almost a version of a landfill permit, because we are dealing with waste. So a heap of stuff, groundwater reports in there, industrial runoff, geotechnical evaluations, development permits, etc. Next slide. We had to do source emission surveys. We had to do air quality. We had to do digestate land application testing, and we still do that baseline, and yearly after that, we're submitting reports. So again, I not to take away from anything, what I wanted to point out here is that in the ag sector, we don't do this. So we do a little bit of sampling and testing, and we do it for best practice. At the same time, we aren't required to do it, and we aren't required to report on it. So all of this is extra to do what we feel is actually a much more environmentally friendly and more responsible way of dealing with the resource. So next slide. On top of this regulatory environment, we had to get the Alberta Utilities Commission permit as well. So another whole gambit of interconnection pieces, dealing with FortisAlberta and AltaLink, and trying to get connection into the grid. Now, this is getting a little bit more easier all the time, which is great. So, you know, with the microgen regulation and all that kind of stuff is coming through, we were too big for microgen at the time. So we had to get a distributed generator permit. So again, lots involved on that front. And it really was a 3 to 4 year grind of getting everything in place that we did need to build this actual facility. So next slide. Of course, with that came the financing. So to be honest, we had everything fall into place. This story was awesome. I've done a presentation a lot of times and have had very little negative review on anything that we talk about. The hardest one to sell really was the banker. So I'll give a shout out to our great partner, Alberta Treasury Branch, that has supported us through this little bit of a journey and kind of believed in what we were trying to do. You know, the biogas industry and this industry in general is interesting because it is definitely a stretch for agriculture financing some of this stuff. The market is very indeterminate. There's not a lot of history out there on this side of the pond. And there's actually, even as late as just this last year, we have the Canadian Biogas Conference, and they had a session actually specific to financiers on understanding how banks can go about financing on-farm biogas, just because of the complexity and really understanding the equity position and what it all takes. There is so much extra that goes into everything from environmental permitting to compliance to letters of credit and all that kind of stuff. So next slide. And it's an ongoing process. So we did all that to get our Alberta environment approval, and then we wanted to change our system to make it a little bit better, choose some different technology, albeit under the same roof. And, you know, okay, now we need to go back to Alberta and amend that approval. So again, just ranting a little bit. It's all great right now, but it's a much more involved system than your regular farmer really undertakes to do that. Next slide there, please. So market conditions and government cycles through this were also challenging. So really, we came into we're really literally only the third biogas kind of farm-based biogas system in Alberta. The first one was up in Vegreville, and it was a public-private partnership with Growing Power and Highmark, so Alberta Research Council, so helped with that one. So lots of great stuff went on in some early days towards that system. And I do remember John McDougall, who was the CEO of the ARC at the time, he said, well, Chris, you know, timing is everything on projects like these. And that's really stuck with me because, you know, like I mentioned, we projected this $70 per megawatt hour going up sort of price return on market moving forward. And our first year was just over $20, and our next year was actually under $20 a megawatt hour. So less than half of our actual worst case scenario that we had projected. So our timing wasn't great. I would say the timing today is much better. So I'll touch on that near the end. in 2006, we had the Progressive Conservatives. Doug Horners was ag minister at the time and really supported this. He came out, we had some great chats, and he understood it. Like I mentioned, some of the early programs. In 2011-12, as we were building, there was some sort of change that happened on the PC level that really pulled funding out of the bioenergy sector. And I'm sure it had to do with some mistakes, some complexity, some economic markets, and really where the money was going. So unfortunately for us, that hurt us at the time. There was a food for fuel debate out there, which kind of biogas got caught in at the same time. We were never growing any crops for this system, but we were still kind of pulled into that, and that's what happened to some of the biodiesel in Alberta. So, and then there's a complexity behind the climate piece and GHGs for sure with any of the bioenergy stuff, and it was a little early days. So we were well on our way. We were driven to do this, and I guess we weren't going to take no for an answer. So we went through. We got it done. We commissioned it in 2014. Like I mentioned, sort of some low power prices. In 2015, we had our government change, and the NDP took over in Alberta, and support was back on the table for bioenergy, which was great. So we went back to the lobby efforts. Because the market situation wasn't sustainable for biogas, and really worked towards having the government again support and the industry. And it was a tough process, and really biogas intersects so many different ministries. Like, it really is about economic development, it's about Alberta, it's about environment, it's about agriculture, it's about energy, and we really never found a home. And we got bounced around a lot on where is the best place to help this industry if we want it to grow. And at the time, Shannon Phillips, as Alberta Environment Minister, she was a great supporter for us, and she came up with the bioproducer program, which was an incentive program for $60 a megawatt hour on our eligible electricity production, which was night and day. Like I mentioned, our first 2 years averaged about $20 a megawatt hour. We were looking at a break even of over 120 really on the biogas that we needed to find. So that was a huge help for us. 4-year program, so it finished in March 2020, and so we're obviously beyond that now, and we're unfortunately back into just a negative situation on the economic front. With that being said, the UPC is back in now, and indication coming in was they still were of the same mindset to not really support the bioenergy. But I will say, since that's happened and COVID has happened and the oil crashed a little bit, we're seeing a lot of support coming in for value-added agriculture, and I'll speak to that in a little bit. But that's where it really plays into sort of this big picture that I'm about to hopefully kind of bring together. So if you want to go through the next, you can just kind of slowly go through the next couple slides. Just some construction photos. It was a great project for us. There's the No Home Like a Dome out in Chin, Alberta, and the biogas facility that's right next to it on our Highway 3 energy transition corridor here. So on to slide 28 there. We have an up and running biogas plant in 2014, and since then we've processed between 15 and 20,000 tons of organic waste a year. Over 50% of that is manure. We've generated a little over 4,000 megawatt hours of electricity each year, which is 2.5 times more than our entire farm uses as electricity. So a nice little success story there. The next slide, and I can say as recently as February 9th here, again, there wasn't a lot of wind that day. It was -25 to -36. So we had power prices in the province through the power pool there of $281. Down, nice to see, and go. So yeah. So next slide, I just want to get into quickly here the Alberta biogas opportunity. I've advocated for this heavily, that I think we have a real potential to drive a biogas industry. And I think it would be great for the province. I think it would be great for rural Alberta as well. So next slide on number 31 here, just to chime in a little bit. We have a greatest hits piece that we've put together, and there's an opportunity. There's over 1,250 farms that produce manure that could be utilized as feedstock in a system similar to ours. And based on our system in Lethbridge Biogas, we've done some work together. At just 10% of uptake facilities, that would be the equivalent of over 75 megawatt of renewable base load electricity. It would be a capital investment of over $600 million. It would be over 400 full-time jobs created in a renewable energy, climate, carbon reducing sort of piece. So as one little plant, we are pretty small on-farm producer. But in the big picture, we can distribute this across the province as a replicable piece. And supporting an industry like this, there's a lot of benefit. And I'll say, I guess I missed it, but you can stay where you are. But the Fortis BC, we have had a recent real uptake in renewable natural gas across the world. So starting in Germany, of course, in Europe, first of all, but in North America, California has driven that market, and renewable natural gas is upgrading biogas, feeding it into the grid to basically green and clean the gas grid. So market prices, there's finally for us a market pull on that front, and we've just signed a 20-year long-term contract with Fortis BC, which is what we've been hoping for and asking for the last 15 years, going after this project, which is awesome, and on sort of a guaranteed price in return. And that's why I will say a shout out and a thanks to basically the province of British Columbia, different regulatory system there where they're still a regulated utility. So they are, sharing that out, but paying us for the environmental attributes for a little bit of a profit. So next slide. In doing what we're doing at the end of the day, we are getting a lot of kudos from our customers, and our customers being PepsiCo and McCain, like I mentioned. PepsiCo had invited me, and I did go over and participated in Paris at the accord and agreements in some side conversations based on agriculture and what we can play to be involved with carbon. And I say this because it's a real deal that is coming for, I think, agriculture and all of us going forward. And next slide, I'd say PepsiCo is not the only one. We have everybody on this slide was there at the table in Paris talking about how the ag food chain needs to participate in climate action. So it is coming to be where, that's a part of the conversation and marketing going forward. So even though they aren't offering to pay us more for food right now, it's a little bit, I feel, the price of admission. And if you go back to the next slide, again, this is the threat. And I say this is specifically a threat for Alberta, for Canada, that, carbon tax coming on export. We are an exporting country for our agriculture goods. And so when I see this kind of news, it really rings true for me on policy-driven climate action, whether there's any belief there or not. It's the world stage on the economics that's sort of bringing everything together, and I think we need to be proactive on this stuff. So I do hope that we can continue the conversation in Alberta and actually build a customer and a compliance space in Alberta, something similar to BC. It's a different market, but there is a potential to really build an industry. We have an incredible resource of feedstock. It can be integrated with the energy sector. It can capitalize on the experience and expertise that we already have in-house. So looking forward to carrying on the conversation, and I think I'm basically out of time. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Fabulous talk. We've got a few questions already in the queue, so I'll just get started right away. Our first question comes from Maria Fitzpatrick. Thank you, Chris, for your presentation. Oops, sorry, I just lost the question there. Thank you, Chris, for your presentation. Thank you for all you do to protect our environment. Are you concerned about the water you need, given the current concerns about coal mining in our headwaters?
So yes, I guess I am concerned. I've expressed that I'm concerned about the water quality and the licensing factor. Now we're specifically not downstream from that same water license that some of the existing coal stuff is. So as far as from the actual amount of water, it doesn't affect us specifically. I am very concerned just about the potential for, again, and in light of some of the recent news around some of that carbon uptake, and coal is not on anybody's high list around that, but it's not, not coal energy. But if we do somehow contaminate water, I am concerned how it could affect our ag industry. I am concerned how it could affect ag processor attraction, which I hope we can get many more ag processors happening in Alberta, and specifically southern Alberta on the irrigated trail. So I am concerned about that, and I won't say much more because there's also oh, that's when I'm supposed to stop talking. um, but so yes, so I am concerned. At the same time, I think we do have a regulatory piece in there that does a good job. I'll say quickly to that even with our process, I find in Alberta in general, and this is totally my own opinion going through the system, we are very heavy upfront regulatory wise, which is great. It makes it very challenging to get an environmental approval permit. We found that out firsthand, and like I said, our oil and gas and coal and everything, that's not an easy thing to do, and I think that's in the best interest of everybody. What I've found on the other side is I do think maybe there could be some, and I appreciate Grant Hunter as well as some of the red tape reduction, because some of that is really inhibiting to good projects and projects that could go. I find if we put a little bit more effort actually on the compliance piece, and heaven forbid policing, but I've found, I think after the fact and monitoring throughout, I think we could share a little bit more a resource to that to make sure we are continuing to do a good job, not just getting through the door. So I'll leave it at that.
Our next question comes from Trevor Page. Has your changeover to sustainable farming reduced your bottom line in terms of dollars and cents? If so, by around what percentage?
Yes, and I would say so far, no, it has cost us a lot more on the bottom line. So for example, we have taken our farm off grid essentially virtually, and we've paid a lot more for our own power to do that. So right now, the feasibility of our biogas was not there. Like I mentioned, with the sustainable practice on the energy side anyways, with this new contract that we have for Fortis BC, that looks like a profitable venture. All to the best of my math, we will be doing very well, hopefully up and running by June next year, in which it will be returnable. The compost and the soil amendments and everything that we're putting back into the soil and the soil health piece, absolutely, we are recognizing a return in many soft ways. Even on the biogas front, though, that the direct return isn't maybe there for. Sorry, that's going to be my phone. Hopefully, that's not too loud. But sorry about that. I'm just gonna go. Can I go turn that off quick?
We'll just wait a couple of minutes for him to turn off the phone, and then we'll get. Yeah. Good.
Okay. Apologies. So
do you want me to repeat,
I hope that makes sense.
Do you want me to repeat the question?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh,
I'll answer it briefly.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a question by Trevor Page. Has your changeover to sustainable farming reduced your bottom line in terms of dollars and cents? And if so, by around what percentage?
Okay, yeah, and so percentage on the electricity side, like the actual cost to us on a cost basis, I would say we're up 50% on the cost of our electricity on the direct biogas of what we've done up to date. That would be from November 2014 to today. Now on the soil amendment and adding into the soil, we had our Vision 2020 to increase net yields by 20% while reducing our inputs 20%. That's a a much more complicated question, and we're actually still working on the results of that. So I don't know what a good answer would be, but I would say there's lots of soft benefits, everything from customers loving what we do to guaranteeing contracts going forward with our customers to less disease pressure on our crops. Healthy soils make for healthy crops, make for healthy foods, as my brother likes to say. So that's been a return, absolutely. So
Excellent.
hopefully that answers it.
Our next question comes from Ian Hurdle. Any comments on direct use of your power when initially you had to use from the grid?
Yes. So I'm trying to think about the question there. We originally did have to actually purchase power back from the grid, and we could not supply our own farm sort of behind the fence. So I'm not sure if that is the question they're asking, but that was a challenge. That has since been changed, and I think we helped sort of change that rule actually. So right now we are drawing our own power before the grid. That does help us reduce our distribution and transmission cost, which frankly is more than 50% of our bill. So that has helped. It doesn't help with our irrigation sites, which are really getting penalized on distribution and transmission. Has nothing to do with the power price itself. Our interconnect at the time of it cost us over $500,000 just to connect to the grid for our project. So it was a really big cost, and it's you still pay the D&T fees. At the same time, we've actually got a letter of support from Fortis Alberta on our electricity. Because we're a base load, we clean the grid in our neighborhood. So we actually make that a little bit more stable grid as far as the power goes. So we've actually recognized that on the farm, that our power is cleaner on the farm, and with a lot of electronic componentry, et cetera, we feel like we're getting a little more life out of it because of the stable power.
Excellent. Terry Shillington, Chris, how does this power source compare to the other power sources? I think you're kind of answering that, but
yeah, so I mean, Alberta's base right now, we're switching. We have mostly coal still, maybe not mostly coal anymore. We're transitioning obviously into natural gas. So on the electricity side, wind is about 10%. Our biogas right now, we're almost non-existent in the whole scheme of things. Like I said, a replicable project like ours across 10% of the manure industry could supply approximately 10% of Alberta's needs right now. There is a shift where we will not be producing electricity. We will keep our combined heat power unit running, which will still mean we'll still be producing electricity, but we'll be running natural gas, and we'll be upgrading our biogas and injecting it into the natural gas grid. So we will be going through ATCO distribution system, and that's how we will be selling our environmental attributes. So every environmental attribute we have is going to Fortis BC in British Columbia because they're willing to pay for it. It's the first time somebody said, yes, we'll come and pay for it. So again, that stabilizes the gas grid a little bit, but there's a real complexity behind the gas grid that operates a little bit differently than the power, but I won't get into that. I'm not sure. Hopefully that answers kind of the question. But yes, we're a stable, renewable energy source. Little better than sun and wind, I got to say that.
Henning Mundell, Perry, on electricity production, all for your farm now from biogas. How about the solar photovoltaic?
Yes, so we've played a little bit with the solar voltaic. We have 20 kilowatts equivalent capacity. We haven't seen a great return on our solar, and it has to do when you're micro generating on a house and you're net metering. It's a little bit different than what we are doing on the farm. So we still need the distribution transmission piece coming through. So, for example, though. That 10 kilowatt array is the one out in front of the domes, and this is it only happens at full sunshine that we're getting that 10 kilowatts. Our biogas plant is 630 kilowatts continuously, so it's obviously that's the difference there. So I'm not against sun energy, but I'm a little hesitant to say it's the greatest balance going forward. There's a I think I'd like to wait and see a little bit what's going to come out of that one. I'll leave it at that.
Next question is from Bev Mundell. Thanks, Chris, for sharing. Are others copying your biogas initiatives? Innovations, sorry, that's my wrong. So thanks, Chris, for sharing. Are others copying your biogas innovations?
So I'll say there's a lot of potential for the biogas industry, like I've mentioned. It is not new. So although we're one of the only ones in Alberta operating, and there's ourselves and Lethbridge Biogas are the only kind of farm-based ones, like I said, going right now. There was the one in Vegreville. There is over 8,000 of these similar plants in Germany operating since starting kind of in the 1980s. So when we talk innovation, this is a commercial product, but it's really it needs the market driver. So I think the farmers will be willing to invest, or a portion will, in this technology if it will make them a return. And I think with the clean fuel standards kind of coming, there's a small. We were hoping for more of a biogas presence in that. Not a huge one, but places like British Columbia and California are paying huge dollars for renewable natural gas. And now that they're figuring out ways that they can transfer environmental attributes and buying at location, that will be the new driver. So I would say I've had more interest and calls in the last 6 months than I have in the previous 10 years on interest in what we are doing. So I would say it's a good time to start. And I sure hope Alberta is ready to play. I know some big players. We've been talking with the likes of big players, oil and gas in Alberta, and they're very interested in the biogas. They're only willing to pay compliance. So whatever they're complied to do for the clean fuel standard is what they're willing to pay. So, and that's market. You can't really complain about that. We've asked them to pay more, but what's happening right now is British Columbia is with their green drive is offering to pay more for the environmental attribute than we are in Alberta. So I think, unfortunately, unless compliance really changes, you'll see a little bit of investment, but it'll be driven by the bigger piece of stuff like the clean fuel standards right now that'll go.
Terry Shillington has clarified his question. So his question was, Chris, how does this power source compare to other power sources? And he's clarifying that question refers to the cost of production.
Okay, so the cost of production. So for example, we compete against, if you were to take coal generation, this is ballpark numbers, don't take my word on it, but I believe coal generation can make money at around that 2 to 4 cents a kilowatt hour running. Natural gas, it really depends on the natural gas price, but it's in around that 8 to 10 cents a kilowatt hour. Our cost for biogas to break even, we need over 12 cents a kilowatt hour. And the reason I say that is, we're smaller. There's an efficiency of scale. Biogas, even though we're running the similar engine to cogen using natural gas, it's much more corrosive. We have to clean it, get the H2S and stuff out. So even though it's a great story on dealing with the organic waste, there's obviously a cost and a maintenance that's over and above other production. Sun and wind, I think the markets are out there. Sun and wind is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, which is great. It's just we can't compete with sun and wind, but they can't compete that when the sun goes down and the wind stops, we're still producing. So by a market trend, and hopefully with the deregulated, some of the peaks coming, that will balance out to sort of help pay like the biogas electricity drive in the end. So hopefully that answers it there, Trevor.
Terry. Yeah, that was Terry, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Terry. Terry.
We have a comment from Kent Perry, maybe one of your family members. Hi Chris, very interesting commentary, especially on renewable natural gas. I like what you're doing for the environment. Then our next question comes from, yeah, do you want to comment or, yeah?
No,
Yeah.
thanks, Kent. Too bad you weren't retired. You could come and help us out a little more on the natural gas side. That's all.
Okay, our next question comes from Mark Goodall. Initially, it was thought that Lethbridge green bins, in brackets, organic domestic waste, could be used to produce biogas. But apparently the local biogas producer found it could not be incorporated into their systems. Could yours use this waste without problem?
We have tried, and we continue to try and go down that road. Ultimately, I hope so. The biggest challenge, again, it's that somebody throws a old t-shirt into a green bin. Somebody treats it as a garbage and throws in a wrench or whatever. We have a system that on the large scale is that contamination just kills us. It wrecks our machinery, and it just takes a little bit of contamination to really do a big deal. So ultimately, it would be awesome if we could use more. That is coming more and more. The technology is getting a little bit better and better to make sure that we can get clean product. It's very interesting. I'll jump into a real quick response here on, for our customers, we have, I'll take McCain across the road, for example. McCain's has sort of they're big. They have two divisions. So one is a marketing division and one is a food acquisition and compliance piece of the company. The marketing piece loves us, right? So we've talked with corporate headquarters on their carbon strategy and selling biogas to McCain to help with their agenda on reducing climate. They absolutely love what we're doing. However, when we are selling potatoes to McCain's, their food compliance and their food safety division is very concerned about our biogas plant and that we are taking organics that have been processed back to the land that we're growing potatoes on. Because you can imagine if they get one or news story that somebody got sick from a potato that came out of Perry's farm on the biogas plant, it would be an absolute disaster for all of us. So there's a real balance between making sure that we are doing the right thing and doing it safely, and that has some that there's a lot of ground yet to cover on that, I would say. And to again, unfortunately, it comes down to cost. There's just a heap more cost in doing all that. So we've done a lot of organic recycling. We've taken grocery waste from Walmart. We've worked originally with BFI and then what turned into GFL. Lethbridge Biogas is still taking some GFL. We still ask all the time if there are easy sources. If anybody's out there that has organic sources, we would love to take them. It was a lot of work for us to do the Walmart grocery waste, and it just, in the end, it took too much time for zero return. And since we were already making zero, we actually stopped that to go to more manure and organic sources.
Our next comment comes from Murray Strom, who has joined us today from Victoria, BC. A highlight of our last Alberta visit was the tour of this farm. And Murray continues on to say, are you planning to replicate... No, that's not it, sorry. Fantastic presentation. We're very proud of you and your family. And then, are you planning to replicate your plants elsewhere in Alberta, or are you just encouraging others to follow your lead?
We are encouraging others to follow our lead. We've been working on an industry. We need some strength in numbers, so it would be great to have more follow. Before the economic feasibility wasn't there, it's very hard to encourage a neighbor to get in and lose some money with you. So it's a different situation now. And I will say that if we are actually working on some innovations. We were hoping to get some more funding, to be honest, from the ERA and we're working with solid manure. So solid manure in the feedlot industry in Alberta is also quite contaminated with dirt, rocks, etc. So we were working on our own home-built sort of system to try to decontaminate this so that we could use more solid manure in our process. And so I would say if we can figure this one out, we're going to have to do it on our own. It looks like a little bit now, but if we can manage that, we have a couple partners that we work with that are keen to work with us. Casco Cattle and KCL Cattle are two large operators that are great partners and smart businessmen and would be willing to invest in something like this. So we'd love to do a little bit more. We're going to make sure that we're making a little bit of money first and have that figured out before venturing into that. But lots of potential.
Excellent.
Hi, Murray.
Our next question comes from Barry Olson. Good presentation. Thanks. But burning biogas still produces carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas.
Correct, it does. So if you take a look at our carbon intensity, so we've done a recent carbon intensity life cycle assessment on our biogas facility, and our score is less than, I guess, as it goes, minus 50 grams of carbon dioxide equivalent per megajoule over what the standard practice of that energy is. So regardless, we are selling 4,500 tons approximately of greenhouse gas offsets in Alberta each year. So that's per the specified gas emitters regulation. It's third-party verified. There is no argument that egg biogas that we, with the proper feedstock and location and figuring it all out is absolutely a better energy. It just costs more. So I would argue a lot at that the carbon intensity is much better than our grid. We're way less carbon intensive than all the other energy sources that are going in, including sun and wind, by the way, I would argue, in the Alberta grid. So electricity wise, with our contract with FortisBC and selling to British Columbia, as we're selling the environmental attributes, we have to maintain and supply a third-party verified report yearly that we maintain that carbon intensity. So we can't just all of a sudden go, for example, and grow a circle of sugar beets to put into our digester, because that would drastically decrease our carbon intensity score, and then our contract wouldn't be valid. So there's mechanisms coming in place that are, they're all in the right direction, and that's what this is about. So yeah, thanks, Sir Barry.
Our next question comes from Graham Fogg. Hi, Chris. Have you now upgraded your equipment to clean up the biogas to produce RNG for FortisBC? What kind of payback on this investment do you expect in years?
Well, we'll tackle that one as it comes, but absolutely. So we are that's the good news with the FortisBC contract. We are expanding our plant. We are presently we are in the detailed design engineering portion of what's called a BUP, or a biogas upgrade plant. So we will actually be co-locating the BUP with our digester, and then, like I said, we are transitioning into producing RNG instead of electricity with our biogas. And that's all because of market situations. I wish we could have had the same deal just on electricity, since it was already there. But the new market drive, and in a way, I agree with that. I wish we would have done that off the bat. But every jurisdiction is a little bit different. So in Alberta, electricity was the only way we could go when we built. In British Columbia 10 years ago, we could have done RNG already. So, but now you can do the RNG everywhere, and that is the market driver. And of course, you're getting 100% recovery of the energy value for doing that, as opposed to burning it in an engine. The engine is about 35% efficient. We are losing heat and just the efficiency from that, but we are also capturing the heat to use it in our process. So it's a complicated equation, but yes, RNG is coming.
Okay. Our next question comes from, Mark, I see that you've already asked a question. This is your second question. If we have time at the end, I'll come back to you. So our next question comes from Kent Perry. How does the heat value of the renewable NG compare to that you receive from ATCO?
The heating value, you know what, that's a good question. The actual biogas itself is 60%, between 50 and 70% methane. And then the heating value, all I can say is it's going to match the specs that ATCO asks for to feed it into the grid. So when we upgrade it, the heating value has to be a certain quality and spec. And I'm sorry, I'm not the engineer in the family, so that one's not off my head, but the methane value is going to have to reach those specs. I can't remember off my head what the heating value of just biogas is, sorry.
Our next question comes from Brody Curtis, and it's a two-part question. Good morning, Chris. Can the nutrient value of the digestible be compared to that of manure/compost in quantifiable way when it's spread on your fields? And if so, what is that value, and how well does the digestible spreading play into the 2020 goal of 20% reduced inputs and 20% increased outputs?
Okay, good question there, Brody. We're getting into the complexity of the biosphere. So essentially, when we're running spreading straight manure onto ground, the best thing you could do is literally take it out of an animal's butt and then incorporate it in the soil, and you would capture all the energy. But it's an equation of what happens to that manure after it's excreted from the animal. So how long does it sit in a feed pen? How long does it sit in a manure lagoon? How long does it do this? So the whole time it's doing that, it's releasing methane. When we're composting, we're trying to capture and aerobically basically digest that, and I won't talk about the compost, but the digestion is anaerobic digesting that. So what we're doing is we're also stabilizing the nutrient value. So all the nutrients that go in are going to come out in a little bit of different form. All we're really doing is capturing the methane off of that. So instead of methane off-gassing in some of the systems, the methane's running the energy. The nutrient equivalent, what goes in, basically comes out. Now that's not exact science, but it's very close. So we get lots, and that goes, basically we say on our 2020 vision, when we've reduced 20% inputs on the energy, we've produced 2.5 times more. On the nutrition side, because we're getting this organic, the manure and the organics in, it's reducing our nutrient inputs probably 30 to 40%. And we are doing some math on how that compares to our existing compost and manure sources. But easy answer, what goes in comes out. So, and that's all more stabilized and going back to land as an amendment. So hopefully that gets you somewhere.
Excellent. Our next, it's kind of more a comment than a question, I believe. Great presentation from Jess N. Great presentation, thank you. I also work at a natural gas utility with operations in BC, Alberta, and NS. Try Summit Utilities. There's a great potential here. Would welcome the opportunity to discuss investments in RNG and potential to purchase the RNG.
Ah, it's interesting, Jess, and I'll just throw a comment out there since we're on it. But we've been working with companies like TC Energy. They run a lot of gas grid, the transmission side in Alberta. ATCO, obviously, lots of companies, and we have had conversations and tried to approach companies the past 15 years on the sale of our goods, and really the answer was the same. Too expensive, not enough to worry about. Great story, keep doing what you're doing. And in the last 6 months, TC Energy has called us. ATCO has called us. They haven't been willing to go. They're doing their own thing on the RNG, but you know what? Everybody's willing and wanting to play in this game now. So the traction and the momentum is absolutely building. And Jess, obviously, your comment here is just another point that, you know what, there's a real market pull, and it all really has to do with around everything from compliance and the clean fuel standard piece to marketing the green energy and all ultimately back to that Paris Agreement. So thanks for the comment, and feel free. I think I don't know if my contact is up, but email is absolutely the best way to get a hold of me if you want to send me an email and we can connect.
I have just put your contact card up, and I'll leave it up for a little bit longer while I ask the next question. Um,
Okay.
the next question comes from James Byrne. Thanks, Chris. At UVL, chemistry research argues you can produce much more dollar value from ag nutrients. Biogas is step one of a much bigger value added steps. Thoughts appreciated.
Yeah, I'll say it's interesting because when we go, I go participate in the biogas meetings in Vancouver, and in Abbotsford, for example, the biogas plants there, the nutrient loading is heavy onto the ground. So they are really looking at ways to value add the nutrient coming out, the digestate, sort of isolating that and value adding what that is. And I think that's great. Uh, in our situation, we are land rich, so we have a whole bunch of land that we actually want all the nutrient value back. So as much as we may be able to value add and sell that for more, right now we're very happy with that nutrient going back to our own land base. But there's lots of potential. I could absolutely put you in touch as well with some of the work that's already been done on this, and there's quite a bit of it going on. I know specifically in British Columbia, but even Alberta Research Council did a little bit back in the day, and there is lots of potential there for that. Lethbridge Biogas is also wanting to look at that when because they're shifting, also transitioning to RNG this year, and they've been looking at that as well.
Excellent. I'm just going back to Mark Goodall's question. Do you need to pay GST on the power you produce and use on your own? We homeowners with solar don't.
You know what? It's kind of a wash for us because we're a company and we're in agriculture, so we pay the GST, but then we get it back. So it is a transaction, but yeah, it's basically we do not, which is we get the GST from the AESO, from the Alberta Electricity Systems operator, but then we pay that back as the company. So
our last question comes from Bev Mundell. Do you sell your digestate or only use on your farm?
Right now, we use a little bit in our garden, and a lot of people love to use it in their garden. It's a little bit scary because I mentioned a lot of regulatory information before. That brings into a whole other piece, which is the CFIA, so the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. When we start selling fertilizer, and again, it goes back to a little bit all for the right reasons. If somebody were to put this on their garden and eat the strawberries, and somebody were to get sick, that there's a liability there that we haven't really managed or invested in. So it's a tough one. It's a great product. It's a little bit stinky, as you can well imagine, but it's we love it and we do use it, and I think there's some real value add opportunities for the digestate coming out. So there may be more of that to come. Again, when we start turning a profit on this place, hopefully that happens one day, it will all be going back into stuff like that, on figuring that out. So hoping that happens.
Excellent. That was the end of our questions. We got one comment from Jess N. Thanks, Chris. Apologies. NS equals Nova Scotia. Yeah, my apologies for not being quick enough to. My brain seems to not pick that up until after. But yeah. Before we end the live stream today, Chris, what do you have a take-home message for our viewers?
I think what I would just say is I would just encourage the big picture thinking. There's lots of little talk on small stuff, and I think we get sidetracked for a lot of, even with the news and the social medias, we tend to gravitate towards just certain perspectives, and on everything from climate change to energy production to all these pieces. And I think it's so much bigger than that. I say that politically wise, I support people and ideas. I love circular economy and just doing the best that we can with the knowledge that and the technology we have. And you know what, I hope for a system that supports that more and more and more. And so there's lots of great stuff and lots of great stories going on. Like I mentioned in the introduction, is just in the ag sector, we have a huge role and an opportunity to play. And I think, Alberta can help harness, and let's get some more processing going on, like bioplastics materials, PLA, energy distributed across the rural landscape, not just one big that we all share in that. So think big, support the causes, and yeah, I think British Columbia is interesting with this RNG. If you love and support our story, British Columbia does, and their people have voted and to support that purchase of our RNG, right? And Alberta hasn't done that, and we know why that hasn't happened. I mean, we have an awesome fossil fuel sector here, and I'm not complaining or putting that down at all. We're just in a different demographic, but that's big picture, and that's awesome. So I think what, keep the big picture in mind, and don't get honed into just one piece. That came out of nowhere, I guess.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we have lots of thank yous in the queue. I'll just read out a few. Laura Schultz, Chris, thank you very much for the presentation this morning. Very hopeful. Ian Hurdle, super talk. Mark Goodall, way to go. Great stuff. Knut Peterson, many thanks, Chris. And on behalf of SACPA, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. And to our viewers, I hope you will join us next week for a presentation with Kathleen Massey on how are post-secondary students coping with the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's next week, Thursday, at our same time at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Thanks very much, and I'll end the live stream.
Thank you.